Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's policy subcommittee of the school committees meeting. And we are going to begin with review and approval of the December 14th, 2023 policy review subcommittee minutes. Has everyone had an opportunity to review them? Or would someone like to move them?
I'll move them.
Thank you, Valerie. Andy's at a second. All right, Valerie, your vote?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. So now we will move to discussion and possible vote on inclusion in life of the school activities policy. And I understand that this was recently discussed at the DEIJ subcommittee meeting. So Valerie, if you'd like to go over the highlights of what the changes are.
David, Mariah's joined us, and if it's okay with her, she can walk through. She did the draft. I'm
All right.
happy to chime in, Mariah, but
Go ahead, Mariah. And I do want to let those in the audience know. I see we have Connie Clausen on, but I will give you a chance to opine as well. So go ahead, Mariah.
Sure. So the draft that we reviewed last week at DEIJ builds off of the original one, the edits I made to it, and then feedback and comments from a CPAC co-chair and the extended day directors. Last Friday, then during the meeting, another bit was revealed of things, another gap, and the draft I sent to you and Betsy took a first stab at including a new paragraph to clarify this discrepancy, which was we talked about process for extended days, but not for every other third-party provider. On Friday, Val, Stephen, and I met with the parent leaders and discussed the policy again, and there was very useful feedback on the nuances, specific questions, how would this apply to PTOs, questions about, for example, I'm trying to think of a helpful example. Oh, like what types of events this applies to. So for example, PTOs often will sponsor or they'll say room parents will organize something, and that's technically under the PTO umbrella, but it might be completely without the knowledge of the PTO leadership. And so how are those events treated, or, you know, how does this policy apply to them? Just as one example for them to understand. As they were sort of asking about the details of this. So I think that feedback would be helpful to consider as we look at the draft again. And then also at DEIJ, Lisa agreed to both review the extended day director's questions and come up, I believe, with a preliminary cost analysis for this for the month of February. I think it was for the, right, Lisa, for the 8th, we said maybe?
I was going to work towards that. Yep.
Yeah. So that's the summary I've got, David.
All right, so that's very helpful. So we're going to have a cost analysis by February 8th of what a typical month would look like in terms of expenses.
A month?
I am going to try and create something that would be along those lines that would be helpful to the committee.
was it going to be a month, Lisa, or were you going to try to look at?
I presume this was going to be annual cost.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Right. I think that that's what you had asked me to do, is to consider potential annual costs and in sort of major categories.
But is the way that
transportation, that kind of thing. Okay.
So that's data that you would already have, presumably. It's just a question of gathering it. And is your method of computation looking at 1 month and multiplying out by 10, or is it looking at what the annual costs are? So how are these contracts generally structured?
I think it's going to be a challenge for sure, because our participation has been sort of individualized in our approach. I was going to try and address major areas of focus. And I'm not sure how much data I really do have, but I can certainly go on the last 18 months of the individualized programming that we've provided. I'm happy to certainly consider any additional requests in terms of computation.
Okay. Any other questions to Lisa regarding the cost estimate?
Not on the
Yeah,
cost estimate, but, oh, Helen does.
well, no, you're on the committee, aren't you?
Oh, but I wasn't on the cost estimate. It was on a different piece, Helen. So if
It's
you're on
about
cost
cost
estimate,
estimate. So what exactly is Lisa costing out? Maybe I'm confused, but
I have not been given my marching orders with any specificity, but I think there was interest in better understanding how, what the potential costs could be for, in terms of this policy and where the expenses lie, whether, I think transportation came up, and individualized supports if a student needed a one-on-one paraprofessional for participation, various accommodations that could be provided, and trying to quantify those.
I think this is a Herculean task to try and figure this out.
Well, essentially, Helen, what we're trying to find out, how much would it cost to provide accommodations for students to be able to participate in activities that occur outside of the school day? So to the extent that we have some of that information available based upon activities within school day, maybe we can gain some estimates as to that. And just as a reminder, most of this is required by federal law anyway. So this is
Mhm.
trying to memorialize what's actually required of us. Suzanne?
So, for
Oh, sorry,
instance,
go ahead, Helen.
I just so for my own edification, if a kid wanted to, a student wanted to go to extended day and needed a paraprofessional, we would be responsible for the paraprofessional and the extended day, just the paraprofessional?
That would be sorted out between the school district and the extended day program, but from the from the parent or caregiver's perspective, if the program is not taking care of it, then it would be our responsibility.
I get that. I'm asking, are we responsible? What part of the school day are we responsible for?
So we are responsible for really anything that takes place at school if we are partially sponsoring it in some way. So to the extent that we have bidirectional relationships with certain organizations like Steps for Success, for instance. So for Steps for Success, we would be responsible for providing accommodations because we have sort of that bidirectional entanglement, if you will. If a program is a third-party provider that is merely leasing space, and beyond that, there's really no connection, then we don't have the same legal obligation to provide those accommodations. What this policy is endeavoring to accomplish is to transcend sort of those legal complexities and make it much easier from the perspective of the parent or caregiver to have a confidence that their child is going to have the accommodations that the child needs, regardless as to whether it's extended day or Steps to Success, regardless as to whether we have 100% legal obligation to provide those supports, or whether it's only partial or zero. Suzanne, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Helen, you had another follow-up?
It's still not clear to me. I mean, extended day is not something we pay for students.
Yeah.
It's something that, you
Right.
know, and so I'm not clear. I can somewhat see why we might pay for a paraprofessional, maybe. But I mean, I just don't know where it ends,
So
where,
Helen, this wouldn't encompass the fees for extended day being covered if the parent would otherwise be responsible for them without any financial aid. This is for the accommodations to participate in that activity. Right? So we're not
so for
paying
the
for extended.
paraprofessional, not for the cost of the program.
Right, whatever the accommodation is, yes.
Right, this is just for the accommodation portion, not for being enrolled in extended day generically.
Okay, that's the part I was trying to understand that. Okay.
Suzanne?
Yeah, thanks. I think, I'm sorry, I haven't really been in on all this discussion, so I am a little confused as well. Is this an extension of a policy we have now? Is this a new policy? And what's driving this?
This is a new policy, and what's driving it is federal law already requires this to a large extent for programs that are taking place within our buildings where we have some degree of support beyond merely leasing space. And we've heard significant anecdotal evidence that accommodations are not consistently being provided, or at the very least, that it's unclear to a lot of caregivers about what falls on the school district,
Yeah.
what falls on the program. And so we want to make it a lot easier for caregivers by essentially saying, through this policy, we're going to work that all out in advance so that they don't have to worry their child's accommodations will be provided.
And this will be worked out during the IEP meetings, the annual reviews, and is that
So
where
we
it's going
talked,
to
we
work
talked
out?
about this a little bit at DEIJ, and Lisa, you can jump in at any time, but Lisa talked about how the new IEP form on an annual basis will provide opportunity for student interest, so that there may be a bit more of this that happens on the front end, but that's obviously going to take some time. And it isn't going to be the only time, because there are, of course, 4-week or 8-week after school classes and things that come up in between an IEP meeting that may be of interest, and students change and grow during that intervening year. So a
So
lot would, they would attempt to do a lot of assessment and sort of interest seeking at the IP meeting, but that it would be an ongoing conversation.
And so just, again, help me think this through a little bit. So if someone joins a Girl Scout troop, would we provide accommodations for that, or a para, or if they're joining a soccer team that's town but not school related, or if it is school related?
It's
I mean,
defined in the policy, Suzanne.
Okay.
This applies to third-party providers who essentially are in the building and primarily or exclusively serve those students. And those students meaning students from PSB students, I should say. Now, Girl Scouts is an interesting example. We did specify other programs. We didn't specify Girl Scouts, but there is like a particular list right now of programs that we've talked about. And I just don't know enough about the relationship with Girl Scouts to know if it's something we should consider.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm sorry I'm coming in late, I guess. Thank you.
Just sort of the categories that we have that are specified in the policy: extended day programs, plays, choir, band, other performance groups, sports teams or clubs, enrichment programs, cooking, math, photography, other subjects, school newspapers, yearbook committees. Most of those are already clearly required by federal law. The one where we are offering beyond federal law would be extended day programs.
No, we're not offering beyond federal law and extended day programs, David. And the list that you're reading is the types of activities. The third-party providers list is much more specific. It's extended days, enrichment programs, I believe Brookline Music School, because there's that contractual relationship with conservatory, and I believe Brookline Rec is the other one we have listed right now.
Oh, yes, I see the list now.
Yeah.
Right, extended days, PTOs, enrichment programs, Brookline Music School, Brookline Recreation.
Now, Brookline Rec, I think, is a question, and Girl Scouts are a question too, because Brookline Rec runs programs, but should PSB be responsible for that? I think, again, this is part of the conversation
Which conversation?
that we're having about this policy before
Oh.
it gets adopted in its whatever its form would be. Can I add one thing, David, about respond to Suzanne's question about where this is coming from?
Sure.
Okay, so Suzanne, in addition to parents and extended day providers bringing up this issue of sort of uneven application of PSB supports for students who want to participate, There's also for some of the like enrichment activities, various degrees of inclusion or not for students. And so part of this too is an opportunity for OSS, which is enshrined in this policy, to do some training with these programs to help them understand their obligations as well. So that we have already just a better understanding of the fact that they that some of the more exclusionary language that has been used in recent past is also not complying with those programs' obligations under the law. So it's a sort of a collaboration in general, which I think is important for the students' benefit.
Valerie, and then I'll go back to you, Helen. Go ahead.
At some point, we had a section in this on communication to out-of-district parents. Did it go missing in the red lines?
We still have it, but what was explicitly removed was a parenthetical including out-of-district students. And the comment that we received there was that we don't want to necessarily declare or create the appearance that out-of-district students are somehow not our students. So that was the intention behind removing that language. But I also understand that there are some who feel that excluding explicit mention of out-of-district students actually has the opposite effect in terms of perception. And so some feel very strongly that we should explicitly mention that out-of-district students are in fact part of our school district and should be parties to this policy. We may know that, but the general public may not.
Right, I'm of two minds on it, David. I was at the meeting, DEIJ meeting where we changed it to LEA. And I understand why we did, and there are good reasons why we did. But at the same time, in terms of explaining this to caregivers, I think that we either need to have some sort of like a lot of cover language that's a more of a user-friendly one pager that then sends them to the policy or something to sort of bridge that gap. Because I think that 99% of caregivers are going to see LEA and not know.
That was
What that
something that
means.
came up at the PTO meeting as well, was really that there need to be sort of a very user-friendly one pager to help people understand, which I think makes a lot of sense. And I agree with you about the LEA. I don't love it, even though it's technically the right term.
Well, we can at least say local education authority.
No, we did,
Yeah.
but still people don't know what that means either. So
We could footnote it and define what it means, and then in the footnote explicitly state what it encompasses, including out-of-district students. That might be one way around it. Helen?
So I'm asking a lot of questions, not because I'm necessarily against this policy, but I think it's going to be a very complicated policy to enact. Very, very complicated. I can, just in terms of the things that I'm thinking about, and I'm sure there are things I haven't even thought about. But I wanted to ask Lisa, do we presently pay for any paraprofessionals in extended day? Yes.
you're on mute, Lisa.
And so my understanding is our paraprofessionals are
Wait, what was
full-time.
Lisa's answer? She
I
was on
heard
mute.
yes.
What was it? She didn't say anything.
Yes, we
Yeah,
currently,
I saw her shake her head, yes. But that's okay. And the recording couldn't see her, so I agree. Yeah, they could. Anyway, because my understanding is we pay our paraprofessionals full-time. If we have to pay for them to stay with the student, we have to pay time and a half. Correct?
we have not been paying our paraprofessionals time and a half if they are involved in extended day, but we certainly are paying them their hourly rate beyond the school day.
Doesn't that only kick in, Lisa, after 40 hours a week? And most of them are not 40 hours a week?
I believe so.
I think Fair
That
Labor
probably
Standards
would be
Act.
a good
Yeah, but
question
if
to
a
confirm with
paraprofessional is
human resources,
full-time,
but
Right,
if-
but Helen, I think Fair Labor Standards Act is 40 hours. We can look into
Mhm.
it, but
What I'm trying to say is it may not be the same paraprofessional who would be working in the extended day as in the regular school day
Mhm.
with the child, just because
And-
the cost would be prohibitive.
Right. And, you know, something I'm thinking about as I'm trying to provide some insight about cost is that, you know, we talk about sometimes needing an individualized one-on-one paraprofessional, but as I reflect on some of the cases, we need highly specialized paraprofessionals for a student to participate in a non-academic or extracurricular activity, which you know, which is an additional consideration. So there's a level of individualization and customization of the experience that's required. We have over 1,200 students with IEPs in our school district. So certainly this encourages broad-based participation. And so that's where I'll try to provide some insights about potential costs over time, whether it's about transportation or curricular accommodations or physical accommodations, or even just coordination of participants.
Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask about the status of that list of questions from the extended day directors that's appended to the current draft. So some of those are, I think, maybe not at the policy level. Most of them, I think, are questions that we would at least want to know the answers to before enacting the policy. So I'm wondering how we're going to work those into the process. How are we going to figure out the answers to those, before this advances further?
Lisa had said she would answer them at that upcoming meeting.
Yeah, I said
Okay.
that I would be happy to give it my best effort to answer those questions.
I see. Okay.
Lisa, on a practical level, given that we are required to do most of this anyway, is it going to be a heavy lift for your office to be making these arrangements with our various providers? It sounds like this is something that you already do.
It is something we do. I think that I think it could potentially be a heavy lift and require a level of coordination. I enjoy, you know, the school community partnerships and individualizing programs. But it certainly requires a great deal of thoughtful planning and coordination. And right now, you know, we require a level of coordination with higher numbers of involved participants.
All right, thank you. I see that Linda Monak has joined us. Linda, go ahead.
Hi, sorry I was late today, and I apologize for not having my video on. I have terrible internet lately, and as soon as I turn the video on, you all go glitchy on me. First of all, I liked your solution to the out-of-district thing, David. I think my concern, I was the one who had brought it up to Mariah, is that we continually sort of other out-of-district by saying, and out-of-district students. So I like the idea of defining all students in the LEA and then doing a like asterisk, and here's what that means, and being really explicit about it. But to Lisa's comment, I just wanted to add in that, well, I know we say that we are obligated to do this already. Most families don't think we are obligated to do this. And once this becomes a written policy, I think you're going to see an uptick, and probably, given sort of the complexity of some of these students, a significant uptick in the number of people who will try to become more of a part of the school, which I think is wonderful. But just from an estimating workload, I think we need to be really careful about. Right now, parents don't think we do this in general. So once they're made aware of it, I think you're going to see a difference, a big difference.
Oh, I think that's the hope, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. And particularly in the students who will have the highest needs. Those are the ones that have been reluctant to even try many of these programs. So the most complicated students are the ones who I hope with this policy will start signing up. But in terms of kind of the overall effort and cost, that's just something to consider.
All right, anyone else? So why don't we give an opportunity for those who are on the attendees list to speak? I see that Connie Clausen has her hand raised. Betsy, if you could promote Connie.
She's joining now.
Okay.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, hi, my name's Connie Clausen, and I am three things actually that pertain to this. I am an out-of-district parent of a transition age student. I am a former extended day parent board chair, and I also happen to be on the executive board of the Brookline Girl Scouts. So David, cut me off if I'm going too long. My first comment would be about the language of the out-of-district versus the LEA. I have exactly the opposite opinion of that expressed by Linda. I understand where she's coming from. But as a parent who has fought for many, many years to even allow us to have communication from the school district, I feel that there's a large body of people in the out-of-district community that have fought really hard to be recognized as an actual entity and a piece of the school district. And I, similar to the RLA, right? We didn't ever refer to the students in the Remote Learning Academy as, LEA or being different. We saw them as kind of a separate school within our district. And that's kind of the way I view the term out of district, but I understand that others would feel differently. What I would ask is that there be more conversation with the out of district community that allows people that are currently out of district or have been in the recent past to opt in. Like, this has never been on the agenda of a CPEC meeting. It's never been discussed in any of our forums, and maybe it probably should be, right? Like, how do people feel about this? And I think if we're going to write it into policy, we should get more opinions. My other concern about this policy in general is, and it's been a long time since I've been involved with an extended day, but I feel like all of this conversation has been focused on children with significant needs and how much it's going to cost to, pay for a one-to-one or, provide accommodations. But my huge concern is that you are unintentionally creating an unfunded mandate for extended day programs that is then going to get passed on to the entire program in the form of increased tuition. And two examples I can think of would be, like Lisa said, we have 1,200 IEPs in the school district. How many of those call for frequent breaks and smaller class sizes? Now, extended day programs are licensed childcare providers. They have to maintain a child to student ratio according to the licensing of that age group. So if we have, there are kids on IEPs in extended day programs throughout the district. But if we all of a sudden say we're going to meet the needs of their IEP and their IEP says that they need a smaller class size, that means hiring an extra teacher to change those ratios. And that staffing need is not going to be covered by the school district because we're not hiring a one-to-one, but it is going to get passed on to the parent population at large in the form of higher tuition. And the other example that comes to mind is like a kindergartner or a young child, any age that has a developmental delay. It is not uncommon for those kids to have challenges with toileting, which creates extra time and extra effort for the extended day programs. Some accommodate, some don't. But if we again mandate that requires them to hire extra staff members. It requires them to purchase extra supplies to manage that. They have to maintain extra hygiene, and there's a lot more documentation with that. So I I guess that my point is to get a lot more input from the extended day directors. And it sounds like Mariah has, so I might be behind that curve. And then just my third point, and I will stop. For the Brookline Girl Scouts, our only relationship with the schools is that if a troop requests to use a classroom in a school as a meeting space, we are allowed to do that rent-free. We are on the list of like approved nonprofits that would be allowed to utilize meeting space in a school rent-free. Other than that, it's a completely separate organization.
All right, thank you. Mariah?
Yeah, I think it'll be important on this unfunded mandate because as I understand it, but maybe I'm misunderstanding it. I don't think so, though. The whole point of this is that currently extended days are operating in an unfunded mandate in which it's unevenly applied as well. And the point of this is to make it no longer an unfunded mandate that is sometimes picked up by PSB and sometimes not for the extended. This was something they asked for. So I'm hoping that we're doing something that is helpful to them in the middle of that. But again, hopefully, as you said, I am in contact with them. We are getting feedback from them, and I'm sure that they will speak up along the way if their perception of how this is going to support students or to provide a sort of an equitable playing field for the extended days if we start to deviate from that shared goal.
Linda?
And I just wanted to add in my understanding too, as it's written, is that any additional staff or personnel needed to fulfill the needs of these students would be funded by PSB, not by the extended day anyway. Correct, Mariah? Isn't that the way
Yeah, that's the way it's written. Either reimbursed by or paid directly by PSB.
All right, anyone else? Because we do have some other items to get to. So where do committee members, subcommittee members first, but school committee members can answer this as well. Where do you feel we stand in terms of referring this to full school committee? Do we want to wait for the cost analysis or go ahead and refer? My personal concern about waiting for the cost analysis is, to me, while certainly it's going to be very useful information, we're ultimately required to do this anyway. We can't be letting that be an impediment to passage of this policy.
So I'm good with
Maybe-
moving it. I think that the information from the extended days that Lisa has said she'll have for us will be useful to everybody before we vote it. But I think with that, I mean, it would just be first reading, right, David?
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's first reading and we're getting that information from Lisa, that's probably okay. From my perspective.
Andy, what are your thoughts?
The same as Val's.
Okay. Helen?
I'm not sure it's ready for prime time. I think there's a lot of questions that people are asking, and I would prefer for us to be able to have answers rather than go round and round on things.
Mariah? Oh, sorry, Suzanne?
Yeah, I'm kind of with Helen, because I haven't been involved with this, so I'm coming in late, but it seems like there are a lot of questions. One around finance. I'm not against it. I'm just saying there are just a lot of questions in terms of implementation and who manages that and the cost, and doesn't feel like it's ready to be presented to the whole school committee. You can do it, but we're not going to be ready to vote for sure.
Mariah?
I would just say that if Lisa is coming to full school committee to present the financial implications, the policy needs to come with it. So if it's not going to full school committee, then Lisa's presentation should be to the subcommittee, or at the subcommittee level, not to the full committee.
I'm sorry, would it be all
Sure.
right if I speak?
Go ahead.
I believe that I've been asked to present on extended school year services on February 8th. I don't know when the next subcommittee meeting is. I could certainly make an effort to respond to questions and do preliminary cost analysis for the next subcommittee meeting if something the committee would like to consider as an alternative.
Valerie, looks like you were going to say something.
I was gonna say, David, this is up to you. It's policy, but we're meeting on February 5th. I don't know what date policy is meeting in February. Are we the 12th for policy?
I
We
believe so.
had to take the 12th for the meeting with legislators.
Oh,
So
right.
policy doesn't meet then until March 11th.
Ooh,
Yeah. So
thanks.
Can I ask another question?
Sure, go ahead.
A quick question. I know you want to move on, but Lisa, do these costs get folded into the per pupil cost for special ed services? No, why not?
I don't believe they would be, because we're designing, we're sort of working to design a customized extended school day experience. So I had not considered rolling it into,
Well, I'm thinking of a way to pay for it because I don't know how
Well,
we're going to pay for it
exactly.
otherwise.
exactly, yep, exactly, yep.
You know, so that would be important. If it's, and I'm sure that David knows because this is the field that he works in. You know, if it's required, then it should be allowable. But maybe you can find that out too.
You said allowable for circuit breaker? I missed what you said. Okay, yeah.
Well, for circuit breaker or whatever we get reimbursed for special ed services.
Suzanne?
I mean, that was actually kind of my point, was that if this is going to impact our 25 budget, we need to think about to what extent and where that money would come from in the budget. And will we have it ready in time for a vote on the budget?
All right, it does seem that we still have some questions that need to be answered. And also I take to heart Connie's remark about doing a little more outreach to hear about what other stakeholders feel in terms of our terminology and what should be included, what not should be what should be excluded. So I think that we could hold off a little longer, but I don't want to hold off forever. So hopefully we can get those answers relatively soon. Andy?
I do worry that if we're not meeting again until March, that we're talking about holding off for a long time. I mean, I guess I don't personally see a first reading at school committee as being prime time necessarily. It's a way to bring this discussion in front of the whole committee and to set the stage for what Lisa has to say then. So despite this conversation, I would still favor moving this for first reading. There's no vote, and it's not prime time. It's just a way to get it before the committee.
And to Andy's point, there are policies where we have first reading, second reading, third reading. We've even had fourth readings. It at least just gives us the opportunity to docket it at some point when we think it's ready. So I'm persuaded by what Andy has said. Andy, would you like to make a motion?
Sure, I'd like to move to advance this policy to a first reading at the next school committee meeting, or on February 8th.
Do we have a second? Val seconds. Andy, your vote?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. All right, so we will now move on to, just pull this up here. Discussion and possible vote on the wellness policy. Now, Suzanne, not to put you on the spot, but you've been working on this one a lot along with Mariah. So I don't know if one of you would like to present where we're currently at there.
Well, there are two sticking points from the principals. It was around recess. And so Tricia's contacted our DESE people, and they have said that we do not have to say that they have to have 20 minutes for lunch. That has to be started after they're served. And we also don't have to say that it has to be unstructured play. So those were the two really big sticking points that the principals were concerned about.
I don't think I'm understanding what the concern from the principal was that
That they
we included that it was unstructured. or we didn't include?
We had said unstructured in the original, and apparently they
Right.
were, they weren't so keen on unstructured. And it turns out it doesn't have to say unstructured. It can just say recess.
Can I ask unstructured, why that was a,
I don't know why it was a sticking point. I wasn't at the meeting with them.
okay, thanks.
I
s-
was also, David, can I mention one thing too?
Sure.
I quickly glanced at, I didn't get the chance to read the proposal, the notes from the principals and completely. But I think they don't want to have 20 minutes of lunch mandated, if I'm remembering right. And I don't understand how when it can sometimes take 15 minutes or something for kids to even get through the lunch line. I guess I thought, what does it mean to have a lunch that's not 20 minutes long?
Well, the wording had said that they didn't start the 20-minute timer until after they were served food. And it turns out most children eat faster than 20 minutes. It doesn't mean that they can't take the full time, but they don't actually need the full time. Most children are done in 10 minutes, I'll tell you that. And they want to get outside. So principals don't want to have to say the kids can't go, that they have to sit there. And they also find it really hard if you're saying 28 minutes of recess and 20 minutes of lunch after they are served. It's longer than 48 minutes, which is more than they would schedule for that period. Most periods are 40, 45 minutes.
I just felt uncomfortable with it.
Okay.
I will say that we had a really great meeting with Sasha and we went through all the changes that
You did.
I had made, and all those changes were good to just clean up the flow of some of the document, the first sections of the document.
Any other questions or comments? All right, do we feel this is ready to move to the full school committee? I'll go ahead and move.
Didn't it already go to full school committee? It did, because that's where I saw it, right?
It had a first reading already, that's right.
Oh, not a first reading, okay.
Yep.
All right, then we don't need to take any further action on it. I am curious though about just this conversation around unstructured recess still. I'm not sure why that's controversial. I know others have similar questions. Any idea from staff who are present what that issue is?
Maybe sometimes when there's a bad day outside and they're inside, it wouldn't be unstructured. Possibility.
All
I
right.
mean, sometimes recess has activities that are more structured. I mean, they may say, we're going to have a kickball game over here. I don't know if principals feel that feels more structured than unstructured. I mean, you can have organized activities during recess that are still quite open-ended and fun for the kids. On a rainy day, you're going to have, these are your choices and they're going to be more structure. So perhaps that's what they're more concerned about.
Are there still any concerns around creating mandates in terms of minute allotments? We'd heard that previously. A lot of this language seems to be more aspirational. It's not declaring exactly when some of this occurs, such as with health education. Do we feel we have those elements of this resolved?
I think we're okay. Betsy, do you have any other thoughts about this?
I don't. I was just going to say that I know that Matt Dubois and Tricia Laham presented the draft to principals at one of their meetings. They are both planning to come back to school committee when it comes for a second read, and we can make sure that they're prepared to answer these questions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that would be good.
Okay.
All right, very good. So now then we'll move on to discussion of substance use prevention education policy. We talked about this briefly at the last school committee meeting. There were a couple of relatively minor edits that were suggested. Beyond those, anything new from anyone? All right, then we can move on. discussion and possible vote on proposed public art at the Brookline schools. And we have Andy Dean joining us. So would you like to discuss, introduce yourself and discuss this policy proposal?
Thank you for having me. So I'm Andy Dean. I'm the chair of the Brookline Commission for the Arts, also creative director at City Year, nonprofit here in Boston. So we've been working on getting more public art into the town of Brookline for quite a while now. We started an initiative at the commission several years ago, raised some funds for that. At the same time, we've been working with the town on distributing ARPA funds for a lot of public art around the town. We've done a lot of work to do some studies and find out, surveys on what the public would like. There's been an overwhelming response that people would like more public art, especially murals. And so one of the things as a commission we've been trying to do is to find places where we could have murals happen. And we thought a great place to start would be with our public schools. There's such great opportunity for art to be engaging with the students and to help spread new ways for people to be inspired and learn and create interest and dialogue around our public spaces. And so we worked with the FRR, the former principal and the current principal, to consider that as one of the first places that we would do a mural. Because it felt like a great opportunity, since not a lot has been done since initially that name change to really celebrate Florida Rough and Ridley. So long story short, we went to you all, we talked about this, we tried to get this mural done, and you all mentioned we would like to have a policy in place before we do anything. So the commission created this draft of this policy for you all to review. What we based it off of, we did a lot of research looking at what other public art policies are in town for Brookline itself, and then in the surrounding neighborhoods, Newton, Boston, other areas, what they do. And we came up with the draft that I assume you all have seen. Do you need me to summarize that, or was that what you were looking for?
I think we have it. It's a fairly short policy, and it talks about the committee and what the membership of the committee for making approvals. Helen, would you like to provide some historical context about how these decisions have been made previously and currently?
Sure, I would be happy to. First of all, thank you, Andy, for your interest in the public schools and public art. But in the past, we have always had the school committee vote on any public art piece that we might put up. It has not been a committee, including others. There certainly has been, recommendations from schools, usually from the principal, requests, and then we would vote on it. I think, the example might be the Lawrence School, where there's a mural on the side by the garden. Another one, trying to think where else we have it right now. I think one of the issues that I have has to do with our new buildings that I actually feel, we do a lot to design the buildings, to make them appealing, to make them, their design and architecture be, a part of the statement of the building, and then to, I could see having, for instance, a bust of Florida. By the way, her name is Florida. It's hard to say, but it's Florida Rough and Ridley, not Florida. Do a bust of her and have it in the hall there, or do a painting of her and have it on the wall in the school. I see there's a difference between what goes on within the school and the artwork that the students do all the time, along with some specialized artwork that we have in every school. I worry a bit about our walls, our exterior walls becoming canvases for artists, that I'm not sure that's what we would want for our buildings over a long period of time. I think for me personally, I feel that any kind of, statues that we might want to build or some sort of, that sort of thing, that would go in front of a school, but putting things on the buildings, I have a little more difficulty with. We've done it in older buildings, one being the Lawrence, and I'm trying to think if there's any other place. And we had it at the old Driscoll, and we've ended up taking what was an exterior piece at Old Driscoll and putting it inside in the inside the gym, just for that reason, because it's a brand new school and it fit much better within the gym as a place for it to reside. So I have a project for if you want to give some money to at Pierce School. We're planning on restoring the miniature Elgin marble friezes that we have. I don't know if you've seen them in the historic building, and we're probably going to need some money for that. So that would be a great way to spend some ARPA money. We did do them at the high school. That's another piece of art. So for instance, we have the actual size friezes that were brought over by Mr. Lincoln from Greece before they were stolen to to England. And they were up in the old Lincoln School auditorium. And when we did the renovation at the high school, we were able to raise some money and put them in the high school atrium where they fit in, both from a historic perspective in terms of students who learn about these things in ancient history, and from the art perspective. So those are my thoughts about this. I think, our policy, I think we have a policy about art, or if not, this has been the practice that it's always gone to the capital subcommittee with the request usually from the principal. And then there's a discussion about it and eventually a vote after we've worked through a lot of the things about what it means for the integrity of the building, et cetera. But I do think this is something that we should keep as the school committee decision. We're voted to maintain and take care of our buildings. I don't think it should be the committee that was put forward.
I just want to add just a couple of quick things that I forgot to mention. We can put up murals on the walls without doing any permanent issue with the building. We had talked about this prior, that you can put up panels. There are coatings that you can put on the wall that they can then peel off and actually be removed and put inside. And also that just want to underscore that the public in general has mural overwhelmingly in our surveys the most asked for thing. And the idea is to have art that's in the public sphere, not to do it on the inside of the school, which is of course beautiful and wonderful, and we want to do that too, but it's a bigger statement and it's more interactive for the whole town to do it on the exterior of these buildings. And as someone who's worked at City Year for 22 years now and seen hundreds of murals go up in schools, I can tell you that the overwhelming response is always positive. It's the light that you see in students' eyes when they get to see this beautiful art, and how that it makes a beautiful statement to them. And especially in the case of FRR, what we're trying to tell her story a little bit more, because I went to the school recently, and if you go there, there's nowhere that tells her story. And I think to make a beautiful statement about it on the exterior.
There's a plaque missing about that. That's true.
Yeah, but I think a bigger piece. It's about.
You're talking about doing the whole
story.
side there, right? From what I remember.
It would not be like a whole. It would be like a corner. It's so the corner that juts out towards the street.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I think I guess the point here tonight is to discuss more the policy than a specific
Correct.
mural. But I think that the point is that we do need to create more opportunity for this, and I think that as the chair of the commission, I think that our mandate is to work on creating art in the community. So I think involving us in that selection and in that process might be more helpful as experts and people who are professionals and have worked in the arts community and are working with the artists around in the community, we'll have a little bit more of our finger on the pulse and like what's going on, and be able to involve the, you know, the town and the neighborhood and artists a little more readily. And I think having that feedback and that perspective and being able to answer those questions about how you do the murals and how it works might be really helpful for the school committee. And I'm sorry, I'll stop now.
Valerie?
Thanks. Andy, I know you're at a school committee subcommittee, but I'm curious whether you have spoken with the chamber or others about doing this on the side of commercial buildings. I work in Jamaica Plain, which is sort of like capital of murals on the sides of, you know, the Whole Foods and the Purple Cactus and lots of other buildings that are in the public sphere in that way. And I'm sort of curious on how the town has sort of responded in that way. Or whether
we're engaging with a lot of business members about doing both, and that's the ARPA funds separately. We're working on a bunch of murals that will go up on buildings too. It's really hard to get that approval and to find a business owner. It's trickier than you might think. I know there's a lot of murals in JP. I've done murals in JP, but it's a little bit harder than you might think. So, and I think that for us also, it's about that story. Like I was saying, I think that it makes a statement when we put art on our schools, that our belief in art, our belief in the story that art tells, you know, the conversations and the dialogue that it creates can be much more meaningful when it's on our own buildings.
There's also one mural right there next on Zoftics on the side that has kids and Irving's and the whole. It's a lovely mural there on the side of a very ugly building. I mean, I don't have problems with murals on ugly buildings. Let's put it that way. And unfortunately, I have to run a meeting now at 6, so I don't know if there's anything else you need or want from me, but you know, I would highly recommend if we do any policy that it go through capital, because we work with the building department and with others to about our buildings in general.
I would agree with Helen that we ultimately would want to keep this as a school committee decision, since it does involve the schools. What I would certainly be open to, though, is having an advisory committee that includes many of the stakeholders that you proposed in your policy. And I do think that would be helpful because, as you said, you have more of a pulse in the community about what people want to see artistically around town. And so to be able to receive that feedback through a formalized channel, I think would be quite helpful. But ultimately, I believe the decision should rest with the school committee. How do others feel? All right, do you have any more questions for us?
I have to go. I'm really sorry. I thought we
fine, Helen.
would get to this earlier.
Thank you, Helen.
And I'm
just curious,
happy to talk with you later if you want.
Great. Excellent. I'm just curious in terms of next steps, because when we first spoke to the school committee subcommittee, spoke to the subcommittee on buildings. They told us that a policy needed to be written, so we did that. And now I'm just confused about like what would the next steps be to keep this moving forward, because we do want to make sure that we keep it moving.
So we could certainly create a policy that's modeled after your draft and would be similar, but more of an advisory nature rather than having final authority to make the ultimate decision. That would be the direction that I would personally want to move in. But I'd like to hear what other subcommittee members think.
Yeah, I agree, David. And I also want to put a plug in for more public art all over town. You know, the schools are one place, but I do think that there are many other buildings that have great prime locations for community viewing that, you know, where we aren't doing it. And you know, the Zoftics building, I think is a great one next to the school. But we have lots of those kinds of buildings with, you know, brick sides that I think we should look into as well. Whether that's at the, you know, the planning or the zoning, and that there's some relief that comes along with that as time goes on. I think that's how JP tends to do it, right? Is that you get some sort of relief for doing that public art.
There's a little bit more investment in art also from the city of Boston than we get in the town. So we'd love more if we can get more funds in. But you'll see in the next couple of years, I don't know if you saw the utility boxes that went up. We did 10 this past fall. There's going to be 10 more of those. There's going to be like somewhere between 5 to 10 more murals that we're going to be doing. And there's lots more to come. You should check out the Brookline Art Makes Community initiative if you want to see what's going on, or you're welcome to get involved too. We always could use more help.
For those who have reticence to murals being directly painted onto buildings, what other types of art displays does the commission sometimes consider putting up? So there are sculptures, of course, and what else? Just wondering.
Interactive art. There's art that's more like furniture based, like you can do benches that are like artistic in different ways. The utility boxes I mentioned, fiberglass. So those like cows that they put up sometimes around town. There's you mentioned sculptural murals. Yeah, I mean that covers the gamut of most stuff. I mean, there's tile based, mosaic. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Andy Dean or anything else on this topic? Andy.
Just again, what would the next step be? Would one of us undertake to redraft it for discussion at our next policy meeting?
That's what I'd like to see done, yes. So I'm overall very happy with the draft that was presented. I would just like it to be advisory and school committee retains authority, but otherwise I'm pretty pleased with it. Although given that the direction is probably as to be advisory, I'm not sure we would want to have 2 school committee members on it, because if school committee is ultimately voting on it, it doesn't make sense to sort of have it done twice on 2 different levels with school committee. I could maybe see a school committee liaison so that we are all clued into what's taking place, but perhaps we could think of maybe altering that membership slightly.
I'm wondering just to set up an advisory committee. I mean, a typical project I imagine would arise originally from a proposal made by a member of the public, let's say. So what maybe we need is a procedure for people to follow, right? Of which an advisory committee, passage through an advisory committee might be part of that, but merely setting up the advisory committee isn't going to make things clear to people about how to proceed. So I wonder whether we need to actually outline like a process for folks to follow.
I would think so. Go ahead.
Sorry. Would it make sense for people to submit those to the Brookline Commission for the Arts, who would then bring it to the attention of the school committee, or does that not make? I'm just thinking out loud. If we're acting in the advisory committee also, anyways. Or would it be more like it has to go to a town employee and it's like a town planner goes through them?
I think either would work. I would be fine personally with it being filtered through the Brookline Arts Commission and then you bring it to our attention. But how do you feel, Andy and Val, about that?
I mean, I think that point person is fine, but I think there's a step, right? It goes from that point person receiving an application to this advisory commission that we'd be setting up, then to the school committee, right?
So we could have a school committee member who is a liaison to the Brookline Art Commission. So the Brookline Art Commission would then apprise the school committee member liaison about the request or the proposal. That liaison would then present that to the advisory committee, which would then work on it and present to the full school committee.
And then would we have to create an ad hoc advisory committee for every project that that came to our attention, or would we have a standing one that in that case would no longer necessarily include a student and a principal from that building?
I think it would probably need to be ad hoc because it's important to have someone who is in that actual building offering input on it. Otherwise, there's the possibility of, say, a North Brookline group determining what's going to go in and or advising on what's going to happen in South Brookline or vice versa. So I think we would want to have direct stakeholders as a part of that committee, but it could be a mix. So we could have some people who serve a fixed term, just as school committee liaisons for the most part, have their assignments for a full year. We could have some people who are fixed in the role a full year. And then if it's for a particular school building, we would say it'll be that school principal, it'll be, and then a student would be selected from that school and whoever else we might think would be appropriate. So it could be a mix, a hybrid approach.
So then we just need to set up some way of initially vetting proposals before an ad hoc committee gets appointed, right? And then the ad hoc committee would report to the school committee, which would then vote.
That sounds about right to me.
So who
Any
wants
other
to
thoughts?
redraft the policy to sort of outline that sort of procedure?
I can work on that. And
Yeah,
I'll be in touch, and I'll be in touch with you, Andy, if you like, or Val, did you want to?
Well, I was gonna suggest that we make sure that we bring Helen in so that she's not blindsided and that we get her feedback on it up front.
So I'll talk to Helen further about it. If she doesn't want to take that on in the more direct portion of redrafting, then I'll do it. But one way or another, it'll get done, and we'll continue to work on this, and it'll be on our agenda for our next meeting. Any other thoughts? All right, well, thank you very much, Andy, for presenting and for providing the initial legwork. Very helpful.
Yes, and it wasn't just me, it was also other members. Jillian Jackson, I think, is on the call, and Fran Charnas, who's not here. So thank you to them, and thank you for your time. And if you have further questions, you can definitely reach out to me. I'm happy to help.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, so next on our agenda, status update on the PSB flag protocol and Pledge of Allegiance policy. And Mariah, I know this is dear to your heart, so perhaps you want to lead us through this.
Sorry, I had to step away and now I'm discombobulated. Let me see if I can find the draft in my email. Right, okay. Hold on, let me download it. So there were some questions about the Pledge of Allegiance recently, and we looked at the PSB's flag policy. And the question was, in my mind on reading it, first off, there was minor changes of just wording from Board of Selectmen to Select Board. And I'll make this bigger. So one of the thoughts that I had about the Pledge of Allegiance myself was that that we are an incredibly multicultural community with so many students who are either themselves born outside of the country or children of those born outside of the country. Multiple people have either non-US citizenship or are both US citizens and citizens of other countries. And so I drafted essentially a few sentences about this. And basically, it just says that we would still say the Pledge of Allegiance, but it's preceded by the following or a substantially similar statement. We will next recite the Pledge of Allegiance. In our community of many nationalities and beliefs, we recognize that the United States Pledge of Allegiance is less meaningful for some community members. Reciting the pledge is not required. A respectful silence is expected from everyone who chooses not to participate. I think that in my conversations with people over time, many people have expressed the sentiment that they feel some sense of coercion if it's said aloud to participate. And so how do we make it clear that it's a civic activity, but that it has different meanings for different people, and leaving it open like that? So I believe that was the only edit, yep, other than the select board, changing board of selectmen to select board.
Valerie?
Just have a question, maybe for Claire. I'm not really sure who could answer this, but do we still teach the pledge? I don't think either one of my kids could say it, and they've been in PSB in their 9th year. Do we teach it in lower?
I will have to be honest with you, transparent. I don't know that we teach it, but I do think it's just something that's done. I really like the amendment here. I know in my former district, we did something very similar in Bedford, which was a community that had a lot of military families because of the Air Force Base. But I don't believe it's taught. I'd have to check and get back to you on that.
It's apparently recited once a week, I believe, on Mondays, Val.
But I don't know that it was, I'm not sure that it's explicitly taught. Like, is that's the actual question, right?
Yeah, I mean,
find
like,
out.
do kindergartners get like a card, or for whatever first graders get a card that they're following along with, or? I mean, I remember it being like sort of wrote every day, but that's a long time ago, like in the Stone Ages when I was in school.
So just so
I
that
don't-
we're all aware, under state law, and I'm reading directly, failure for a period of 5 consecutive days by the principal or teacher in charge of a school equipped as aforesaid to display the flag as above required, or failure for a period of 2 consecutive weeks by a teacher to salute the flag and recite said pledge as aforesaid, or to cause the peoples under his charge so to do, shall be punished for every such period by a fine of not more than $5. And so it appears that the practice in Brookline has been to recite it on Monday, so once every 5, and if you don't go the 5 consecutive days, then you're okay. But in terms of the policy that is before us, I really like the language that Mariah has added. Andy?
I find it, I mean, the language that's added, it's almost as long, if not longer, than the Pledge of Allegiance itself. And I just think it would be a rather strange ritual to go through each time. If we're going to say something like this, I would just cut out everything except we will next recite the Pledge of Allegiance. A respectful silence is expected from everyone who chooses not to participate. That acknowledges that some can and will choose not to participate, but I'm not sure we need to go into such detail about the reasons you might not want to participate.
But I think that's the whole point, is the reasons you might not want to participate. Otherwise, you don't know why you might not want to participate. You might feel uncomfortable. You're a small child. There's this pressure to participate or to
Right,
not
I think-
participate. It could go either way, right? I mean, there could be kids who don't understand that this is an educational component, I think itself, Andy, in my opinion.
I agree with Mariah. It's acknowledging that there are those in the classrooms who may feel uncomfortable, may feel coerced, pressured in some way, and that we have an understanding that not everyone from our community is American or comfortable reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, or even Americans themselves might not be comfortable with reciting it. So it's just an acknowledgement that it's okay to be in that category of not being comfortable.
And it's not just like people who are outside of the country too. I mean, it references God. Some people may not have that sort of religious practice where they want to feel comfortable saying those words. There's a lot of different things here which can lend themselves to discomfort.
Suzanne?
This is something we might want to pass by the principals to see what their input is on this. I'm kind of with Andy. I'm not sure we need to say this length every time. Maybe we do it, through September, or we do it periodically, but kindergartners, first graders aren't going to know what all these words mean anyway. So I don't know. I think shorter would be better, or at least weekly shorter would be better. And maybe occasionally we have the longer explanation.
Claire?
It could also be that there's something that's posted in the classrooms that has this language and it's explained earlier in the year to share with students so there's an understanding, but it's just posted somewhere and then you do the shorter version.
I do think, though, it would need to be shared verbally because of Suzanne's point, for younger students who perhaps aren't reading at this level quite yet, just having it posted doesn't mean it's going to register with them. So maybe some combination.
Yeah, you need both.
Right.
I agree with whoever said it should go to, was it you, Suzanne, who said this should be go by the principals? I think so too.
All right, anyone else? Okay, the next step will be to send it to the principals for their opinions, and we will revisit this at our next policy meeting. All right, next up then, in terms of our agenda items, status update on attendance policy. So basically what this is referencing, we had discussions earlier in the year about making it
Attendance policy? Is it the assignment policy?
the assignment. Yes, I just
Okay.
lost the itinerary here.
Okay.
So the school assignment policy. And we had discussed earlier in the year that we wanted to make it easier for students to be able to stay at the school that they had been attending the prior year, even if they move to another part of Brookline. And we had requested some data on this about how often this comes up as an issue and whether if we change the policy, we would project that suddenly some schools would get overcrowded. I'm not sure if we have that data yet, but do we?
It was coming from Megan, right? Wasn't Megan going to give you the data?
Yes, so I haven't received anything from Megan, but I don't know if someone else perhaps has been working on this.
I
No,
think
I
she
had
may have it, so I'll be sure to get it from her tomorrow and share it with everybody, but I don't have it now. I apologize.
Okay.
I'll
David,
check with
did
her
you
as
see
well.
did you see the edit that I sent in the policy on Friday, I think?
Not yet, but I think we did get an updated draft posted. Pull that up.
Betsy, was that the one that got posted? The one that I sent on Friday?
Yes.
Okay. David, do you want me to talk through?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So I think when I went through and read that section, there was a lot of, Betsy had asked me, I think Betsy, because I had actually asked for a different section of this policy because I was hoping to put in the class size guidelines that we've been talking about. But Betsy sent me this part and there was some confusing wording around the use of the word out of district or the term out of district when we're actually referring to different school zones in within town. So I sort of just rearranged things and tried to clean up words. But the one bit on this part that we're talking about, do you mind going down? I think I highlighted it in yellow. I think I highlighted it in yellow. Yeah.
Do you see it now?
Yep. So basically, the idea was that the current way is that basically students can, which is the first sentence of this paragraph that has yellow later on, that students can basically stay if they get approval from the superintendent of schools. And the alternative that I put there was essentially that it's almost flipping it around. So they're allowed to say it was mute on whether they had to leave immediately or not, but I clarified that they can like ride out that school year that they're in at their current school if they move mid-year. And that they're assumed to remain at that school unless they request reassignment by August 15th or unless they're notified of reassignment by the superintendent by August 15th. So essentially, if you don't ask, you're staying put unless you ask to be moved or they tell you you're being moved by August 15th. So it sort of just changes the default from definitely moving to there has to be an affirmative plan to move you or you request. And other than that, I think the changes I made were essentially just cleanup changes, like clarifying things and removing the references to out of district.
Claire?
Hi there. I was just curious about the August 15th date. It seemed to me that we would stop it at right here, which is the school year, and there would be a period. I'm curious about the assumption that says, and we will be assumed to remain at the school year unless request reassignment by August 15th, and then so on. I'm curious about the August 15th. Is that why that date?
Well, it doesn't have to be that date, but I chose that date because I thought it would give both parties, especially PSB, a lot of leeway to sort of see where all the shifting sands were and to decide if they actually needed to move a student. And because if you make it earlier than that, then, I mean, imagine, I'm making this up, all of a sudden 10 students enroll in the second week of August, and they do need to make an adjustment. It gives them flexibility of time to do that.
I guess I was just curious because the date, I guess you can use the date, but technically they can ask at any time. Is that correct?
They can ask at any time to be moved. I believe that's the current practice. They can ask at any time, but this is the point at which this is where they can request reassignment, but otherwise we assume you're staying, right? Like that's the point, is you're staying put unless either side notifies the other side. Now, there's certainly extraordinary requests, I guess, as you're describing. That was the way I was thinking about it.
Valerie?
Does anybody remember when we ask for residence? That happens in June, is that right? When registration sends out to confirm that you're still residing at the same address. I'm just trying to line up the dates, Mariah, and see if there's how much time central office has to.
I don't think they ask you to reconfirm your address until the fall when they send out that package after school has started. Like they always want you to update your address, but the formal time when you reaffirm your address, if I recall correctly, is when they send out the data request after school starts, that first week of school. But that is a Megan question, probably not a Mariah question.
I think it would go to this timing, right? Because we want to give the superintendent the opportunity to actually change for a school year, and he doesn't know who's moved until September.
But then that wouldn't give him a chance to make that decision, right? The whole point is that people have to opt in. I think technically you're supposed to let them know as soon as you move. I don't know if that says that somewhere in this policy, though. It might say it's somewhere else that you're supposed to notify. And it might not be in this section. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I appreciate flipping the onus in terms of who has the obligation to report. I do worry a little bit that this, on a practical level, might not really accomplish what we'd initially set out to do, which was to create that stability for students to remain at the same school. Because as long as the superintendent by August 15th or whatever the date ultimately ends up being says, okay, you're going to this new school, then we're right back to where we began in terms of. So
but also if it gets to be the week before school, they can't, it's too late. That kid is in that school for the year, which is what happened last summer, if I recall correctly. It was like the week before school started. And that's what we were hearing about.
Even so, my personal concern is more about making sure the child gets to stay with the same school community, not so much about whether it's 1 week notice or 2 weeks notice or a month notice. Obviously, it's much worse if you're only finding out right before the school year, but more broadly, I would like students to be able to stay a part of their school communities, at least within some set of boundaries, if we need to attach additional conditions to that.
I agree with you, but we were waiting for the data from Megan anyway.
Anyone else? All right, so I'll loop back with Megan to get that data. Thank you for these additional revisions, Mariah. And that brings us to an update on the building access policy.
David, can I just say one thing? Sorry about
Sure.
that. So that was section J1, and section J2 is about assignment to classes within, not just assignment to school, but assignment to classes. And so I did, and I sent it earlier today, put a new section within J2 on class guidelines. I don't know if that falls within what you want to cover tonight. I'm just saying that it is there if you wanted me to pull it up or anything.
Sure, you can pull that up. I didn't see that in what was posted today, but okay.
I didn't post it because I know Mariah wondered if we should run it by principals first, so I'm sorry I did not post that one.
Yeah.
But we're not going to be voting on anything today. We can still look at it.
Let me pull it up quick. So there was just mostly minor edits, like cleanup stuff and renaming things. And then down here, there's some wording. I'll make it a little bigger. But basically just saying, referring to the guidelines, saying they're determined by other feature or other factors. Again, the idea was sort of to go along with some of the things we've talked about at school committee about how to enable flexibility for district and building leadership and to support them in other choices if they see it's appropriate. But also, as Betsy said, I did flag that this should go to principals.
Do we want anything in there about 9 to 12?
Well, I thought that could be something they commented on too, because I wouldn't know what to write about 9 to 12.
Okay.
So anyway, that's what I sent.
All right, this looks good. Okay, so our final substantive agenda item of the day, status update on the building access policy. And I put this on the docket, not so much for wordsmithing of the existing draft, but more to discuss where we're going to go from here in terms of soliciting input from the principals, what mechanism we think would be best for doing that. Andy, I think you had some specific ideas on this, and I'm not sure if you wanted to share those. Just about how we're going to work with principals to get their feedback in a manner that's going to help us.
Yeah, I think the issue is just how to do that in a way that whether we should be working directly with principals or whether principals should be sharing their thoughts with somebody at the deputy level who would then discuss it with us. I think that was the main issue.
Right.
David, can I comment on that?
Sure, go ahead.
I would love if we could have a workshop with the principals in which we talk about building access and security in one big topic, because I think there's a lot there, and I think it would be helpful to hear all the different perspectives, and because there's like very practical implications that are really being not addressed right now, and or at least not addressed uniformly. And I think it would be really great if we could do that.
I certainly agree.
I personally would favor a workshop as well, as long as that was okay with the superintendent.
I agree, but does that mean that we're waiting until July or that we can get something in?
No, I think we could work on this a lot sooner than that. So we'll talk further with the superintendent, make sure that he's on board with that idea, and then find a time that we can bring everyone together so that we can get that input, or at least a subset of us, depending on how we want to meet.
Yeah, could it be set up actually as it'd be nice if more than a subquorum of the policy subcommittee could be part of it. So is there a way to set it up as some kind of official meeting of this subcommittee so that more than 2 of us can be there?
Why couldn't it be a real workshop that we do in person, just like our regular school committee workshops, and have
So then
all the school
anyone-
committee there in person and principals there in person?
It could be. I just want to make sure that the superintendent and the principals are okay with doing it that way. Some might feel otherwise, but assuming that they would be okay with it, then yes, I would agree. An in-person workshop would be the best. All right. Okay, is there any new business? Seeing none, that concludes our meetings. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks. Have a good night.